A few weeks ago, I introduced Samantha. Now, having spent 11 years in nursing myself, there are basically two types. There are those who become desensitized to it, who don't recognize, they don't feel the compassion as they do when they begin. Others are generally so compassionate they can't desensitize themselves to the horrors they see. Samantha appears to me to have the best of both worlds. Able to detach herself, also very capable of showing the compassion and the sensitivity that patients need for a very good experience, rather than the nightmares that any kind of hospital visits generally will be. She's also a mother, a wife, and a student. She puts a lot on her plate, and she is more than capable of succeeding in anything she does. My conversations with her were enlightening and very informative to me. It's time for their generation to pick up where ours left off. And after talking with Samantha, I feel their generation has a very, very good chance of success. And with people like her, I foresee a great future for anybody. She is a wonderful woman with heavy standards, strong belief structure. She is somebody you can trust, somebody you can believe in. She is definitely somebody I would like to get to know better, and I think everybody should take the chance to get to know her better. Now to move on, I have my my informative speech, Motives for Treason. There's many proclaimed justifications for treason. When I was with the military police, they gave us a method to justify beginning and investigating treasonous activity. They generally define it with the term of MICE, which is money, ideology, conscience, or ego. This acronym comes from the MPI training I went through when I was just entering the Army. And I will be utilizing 4 of the top 10 people convicted of treason or charged in one case. While some of these people can be described as having more than one of those justifications, I will only be giving one for each. First off, let's look at the treason committed for the sake of money. Money is the predominant justification in the United States, which is why it's first on the list. We're going to start with John Walker Jr., who in 1967 snuck into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C., offering to sell the secrets of naval communications. And according to the New York Times, he handed over settings to the cipher machines, and for a decade and a half gave the Soviets the locations of all American nuclear submarines. He also gave procedures the U.S. would follow to launch nuclear missiles in the event of war. He also gave almost every troop and air movement into Vietnam throughout the Vietnam police action. Though it is unknown how much it's never come to light how much money Walker received. But again, according to the New York Times, one of the members of his group admitted to receiving over $320,000 in the course of 10 years. Now we can look at ideology. Ideology in the United States is generally the least motivating factor. There's not many people who think there's a better form of government than we have. While many don't agree with our government, finding one better is very difficult. Again, according to the New York Times, currently 1 in 5 are ideologically motivated, though prior to 2000 that number was substantially less. And we have Adam Yahweh Gadon happens to be one of those who are ideologically driven. He was an American-born who converted to Islam and joined one of the extremist groups. Gadon served Al-Qaeda as a translator, a video producer, and a cultural interpreter, and a spokesman. He was the first American accused of treason since World War II. And unfortunately, he will never be tried for treason. It's widely believed the Predator drone killed him when on an Al-Qaeda attack. Now we're going to move on with conscience, or also sometimes referred to as coercion. Conscience is one who feels their country is just incorrect, how they view how they're doing certain tasks. While most conscience-driven individuals can also be ego-driven, I will give an example based on the given testimonies of the individual without going any deeper into that. This is Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden has said by the NBC News that he is a conscience-driven individual. He thought that we were wrong in what we were doing. As this is current information, most of his actions are pretty well known. He gave the world the information about the activities of the NSA and gained temporary assignment in the Russian Republic through intermediaries. Snowden believed the NSA was exceeding their authorities, as was the American government, and utilizing capabilities to tap the cell phone systems and the internet to gather information. Though anyone with any kind of knowledge of the internet whatsoever, everything you do is tracked. Whether it's the NSA or Microsoft or Google, everything you do is tracked. But finally, we're going to go with ego as the final justification. An ego is generally somebody who is considered to be righting some personal wrong they feel they received. And for this example, I'm going to use Benedict Arnold, probably the most famous traitor of all time. Though he had been given British information for some time, he was only caught for attempting to give away West Point to the British during the American Revolution. His treason was only unraveled by the capture of a British general who happened to have the documents from Arnold in his sock. His choice to commit treason was most likely slights from the Continental Congress. They failed to promote him to Major General when those with lower capabilities were promoted. And once he was given the promotion to Major General, they also failed to return his seniority to him. His successes were more than once given to somebody else instead of Benedict Arnold. The best example of that would be the Battle of Saratoga, which is considered the turning point of the American Revolution, was actually won because of Benedict Arnold. However, anybody who studies history knows that Arnold is not really given the credit for that. In fact, since his treason, he's not given credit for most of his work, and most people aren't taught. These are just 4 of the examples. There are many more, and many more that will never come to light. No matter what your justification is, treason is an abuse to trust and causes death and pain. Ironically, most of these people who worked in the upper echelons of military or government at their respective times. Obviously, all the security checks in the world just can't see into a person's heart. There will always be those few who look out for themselves first, and the good of others is a secondary consideration. But those convicted of treason are considered attaint or stained, meaning dead in the eyes of the law, even before they are executed. Treason is punishable by death as the maximum punishment, and according to the Constitution, punishment is set by Congress, not by a judge or jury. And that's Article 3, Section 3, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution. And finally, we're going to move on to the persuasive speech, which is affirmative action is a form of reverse racism. It's time. Affirmative action had its place in the 1960s when the country was just beginning to become desegregated, and people needed the step to help them into the door. However, now we've gone beyond that. Me and my roommate went for a civil service job, and we took an exam for a position. We were just getting out of the military. I scored a perfect score on the exam, 100%. And my roommate got an 85 on the 85% on the test. And yet when the list came out in New York, you're listed in numerical order as to when you're going to be hired. He was 17 positions above me. He actually refused the job because he was personally insulted that they would give him a position just because of his race. And to him, he actually told me that they should not even put that question anywhere. You're separating people just by putting that question out. By calling yourselves one type of group or another, you're separating yourself. Now, affirmative action has many negative aspects, and proponents claim it is needed to right past wrongs. President Johnson in 1965 said, "You do not take a man who for years has been hobbled by chains, liberate him, bring him to the starting line of a race, saying, 'You're free to compete with all the others,' and still justly believe you have been completely fair. How are you not fair?" I disagree with President Johnson. If somebody has the capabilities to run that race, you stand them up to the line and say, "You're free to run, you're free to compete." If they're good enough, they will compete. And more often than not, they'll win. To consider punishing men today for what their ancestors may or may not have done is just as wrong as what their ancestors did. You can't punish. I grew up in New York. The North was predominantly slave-free. So, as a white male, why should I be punished for what the Southern slave owners did or didn't do? You know, you're condemning the whole Caucasoid race because of what some of their ancestors did. And the American Historical Society actually found that 80% of the slaves that came to the United States came knowing full well what they were coming for, voluntarily got on the ships. They were looking for a better life where they at least had a roof over their heads, they at least had food. Poverty in Africa is not something new to today's generation. Poverty in Africa has been around for a very long time. Now, affirmative action in itself violates American law. For example, the American Constitution, the 14th Constitutional Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment guarantees rights to every person. This does not apply to just minority citizens. It does not apply just to white citizens. The amendment gives everyone the equal protection of the laws. By favoring minorities, not everyone is given equal protections. The minorities are giving a step up. They were giving a benefit. It's not equal. Equal is everybody being treated the same. And then you have Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Title VI prohibits organizations that receive public funds from discriminating on the basis of race. By choosing somebody over somebody else because of their race, regardless of if you're choosing a white over a black because of their race, or if you're choosing a black over white because of their race, it's a violation of Title VI. Richard Cohen from the Washington Post made some concise points. Affirmative action sets one race against another, and it does. It still puts one over the other. We will never achieve equality as long as one is given preferential treatment. It elevates sheer skin color to an importance it should not have. It shouldn't. Colleges should not ask what race you are. Nothing should. It should have no importance whatsoever. If you're an American, that's all that matters. Affirmative action was always meant as a temporary fix to deeper, more troublesome issues. You know, at 1964, it was important. It was necessary. That is the truth. In 2014, its time has come and gone. It's time we stop separating people by their groups and make them all Americans. There's also harm involved in utilizing affirmative action. Affirmative action is most often explained by effectively telling minorities that they're not good enough to compete on their own merits. And that's exactly what it says. It's saying, you're not good enough, so we have to give you a helping hand. This alone causes self-esteem issues. It causes division, and it limits the motivation to succeed. People will also believe affirmative action beneficiaries got where they were through special treatment, not through hard work. As Yale law professor Peter Schuck argued in his book Diversity in America, Failing at a more prestigious college for which someone is not academically or financially prepared is more harmful to their life's prospects than succeeding at a lesser institution. There may have been a time for affirmative action, but the time has passed. It is time to stop punishing white males for the actions of their ancestors. In the 1960s, affirmative action was a good jump start, but it's time for people to stand on their own 2 feet. No one deserves special treatment. Equality by definition means everybody is the same. The argument is not that the practices are perfect in society today. However, where injustice is found, that is what the government is for, to penalize and punish those responsible for the injustices. With great luck, someday in the future, there'll be no need of any programs or any need to even look for flaws in the system, and everyone will be treated by their skill, talent, and ability alone.